I forced the biggest villain to be my girlfriend. She didn't mind. As the school bully, I had people beat her up every day until she agreed. To save my villain girlfriend, I decided to become the biggest villain myself. I went to the Imperial Capital, one step ahead of her, to help Mu Wanning collect her debts. But just a few minutes after I arrived in the Imperial Capital, Mu Wanning called and gave me a harsh scolding. She told me not to be impulsive. But I suddenly calmed down. I would wait for Mu Wanning to arrive. I had to trust her. Mu Wanning arrived in the middle of the night. I had bought some food at the entrance of the train station and was crouching under a pillar on the platform. I scanned the crowd of people getting off the train one by one, but saw no familiar faces. So I lowered my head and started drawing stars on the ground with a small twig. As I was drawing the third one, a cool, clear voice came from above me. "What are you doing?" I immediately broke into a smile. I quickly stood up and dusted off my back. "Waiting for you. You must be tired from the trip. I bought this for you. Don't talk to me yet." Mu Wanning grabbed me with one hand and started pulling me towards the station exit. Her strides were long, and she had no intention of slowing down for me at all. Only after hearing me gasp from being pulled so hard did she slow down. Mu Wanning's face clearly read, "I am very angry." I tugged at her clothes, lowered my head, and said meekly before she could get angry, "I know I was wrong. You said you were still sick and didn't know anyone, yet you ran off to the Imperial Capital by yourself. What if something had gone wrong?" Mu Wanning poked my forehead. "I really don't know what goes on in that head of yours." "You are," I retorted without missing a beat. Mu Wanning froze for a moment. I took her fingers and lowered her hand, grinning as I said, "You're all I can think about. Stand properly for me." Mu Wanning frowned, pulling my ear. "You still dare to be cheeky with me? Do you have any idea how worried I was when I went to pick you up from the hospital and the nurse told me you'd run off? What was there to worry about? It's not like I'd get lost." I muttered under my breath. Mu Wanning's brow hardened and her voice dropped. "Say that one more time." I flinched. Mu Wanning has gotten really fierce nowadays. Before, she would secretly sharpen her knives behind the scenes while at least keeping a smile on her face. Now she's one step away from holding a blade to my throat. Seeing the meal for two in my hands, Mu Wanning's expression softened. "You haven't eaten yet." Seeing her change the subject, I immediately perked up. "That's right, I was waiting for you. If I hadn't come, were you planning on not eating at all?" She's so difficult, her train of thought is just bizarre. Mu Wanning took the buns and, in the same motion, took my hand. "From now on, don't just disappear from my sight without a word. Especially don't hide things from me and act under the excuse that it's for my own good. Got it?" I pursed my lips. What if I said I didn't hear you? Mu Wanning shot me a sidelong glance, the warning in her eyes unmistakable. I immediately changed my tune. "Yes, girlfriend, I'll be sure to obey." As Mu Wanning and I walked through the capital at night, the wind was hot and dry. I led Mu Wanning by the hand as we walked slowly, the sound of the rolling suitcase a bit grating. Mu Wanning glanced back, and our eyes met. "What do you think I came to the capital to do?" Mu Wanning seemed genuinely curious. I thought for a moment before answering seriously. "I'm afraid you came for revenge." Shouldn't I hate them? This is a society ruled by law now. I said these words with great sincerity. There are many ways to deal with them. We can choose a gentler one. Mu Wanning smiled, the corners of her lips turning up. A society ruled by law. "What are you thinking about in that head of yours again?" I frowned and shook my head. "I haven't decided yet." Your father asked me to go to the Mu family's home to get something for him. Mu Wanning reached out and intertwined her fingers with mine. Mu Cheng feels guilty towards me, so I imagine this matter won't be too difficult. You're going to the Mu family's home. She saw my eyes widen in disbelief. She found it amusing. I was very worried. Is the Mu family's home that easy to get into? Back then, Mu Wanning knelt until her knees were raw. That woman, Chang Haitang, has always been overbearing. Even in childhood, she would incite her to stir up trouble. Chang Haitang was most likely insecure. I could also analyze her motive for harming Mu Wanning's mother. It was nothing more than the fear that Mu Cheng and Yi King would rekindle their old flame. You will return to Jiangsheng tomorrow. I frowned immediately. How could I leave you here all alone? Be good and listen. I can hardly protect myself in the capital if something were to happen to you. In any case, I am Gu King's only son. It won't be that easy for the Mu family to make a move against me. I was particularly stubborn on this matter. Mu Wanning looked at me for a long time. Why are you going to such lengths to help me? I pressed my lips together. Mu Wanning's gaze was complicated. You're a very interesting person. Are you hiding a secret? Her every word sent my mind reeling. It was too dangerous. This was a blatant probe. What secret could I have? I muttered under my breath. Mu Wanning let out a soft, inscrutable chuckle. I changed the subject and pulled her along. Just let me stay in the Imperial Capital. I promise I won't cause you any trouble. Because I want to stick close to you. I said this with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mu Wanning's chest rose and fell. Don't tell me you can't live without me. It's not that serious. I shook my head. But I just want to watch over you. Besides, Lin Zixuan is here. I was somewhat surprised that Mu Wanning mentioned his name. Why bring him up all of a sudden? I looked utterly baffled. I knew for a fact that he was still in school in Jiangsheng, so there was no way he could be in the Imperial Capital. A thought seemed to cross Mu Wanning's mind, and she smiled. Fine, if you like being by my side, then stay and have some fun in the Imperial Capital for a few days. I'll try to get my work done as quickly as possible so we can return to Jiangsheng together. I didn't realize it at the time, I only found out later. Mu Wanning was a terrifying person. Even with my system and my cheat abilities, I was no match for her. I booked a room at the hotel closest to the Mu residence. Mu Wanning knew exactly what I was thinking, but she gave no indication. Before leaving, she leaned in to instruct me. Try to stay here and wait for me to get back, all right. Could I have said no? I decided to wait and see what would happen. I was determined to see just what Mu Wanning was up to. Originally, the system's surveillance feature cost points to use. I bargained with the little assistant, arguing logically and persistently until I wore it down into giving me the feature as compensation. From the moment Mu Wanning left the hotel, her every move was fed directly into my mind. Carrying her suitcase, Mu Wanning glanced up toward the floor I was on. Through the feed, my gaze met hers. A chill ran through my heart. Although I knew it was impossible for Mu Wanning to discover the surveillance feature, my heart pounded and ached faintly when our eyes met. Mu Wanning hailed a taxi and headed for the Mu family residence. During the ride, she gazed out at the skyscrapers, her eyes vacant and her mood somber. What was my real purpose? This was the question she had been pondering lately. She suffered from severe mental illness. She was sensitive, suspicious, and intensely paranoid. My appearance had been perfectly timed, yet my methods were erratic and unpredictable. Initially, she had assumed I was just toying with her, and that my actions meant nothing. that sooner or later I would abandon her. And yet I hadn't. For her sake, my own actions bordered on obsessive. Whether it was confronting Lin Zixuan or helping her get revenge, I was completely unabashed. Mu Wanning pinched the bridge of her nose and let out a long sigh. She didn't understand me at all. Mu Wanning arrived at the Mu residence alone. The opulent villa now looked weathered, showing the passage of years. Creeping ivy densely covered half of the house's exterior. Beneath the rose trellis, a wide variety of flowers were displayed. These had been planted by Mu Cheng's own hands years ago in an effort to please Chang Haitang. She recalled the time she had pulled up a flower in a fit of pique, only to be cornered and brutally beaten by Chang Haitang's bodyguards. She remembered everything. Mu Wanning paused for only a moment before passing under the long flower trellis and knocking on the Mu family's door. This was different from the original plot. In the original plot, Mu Wanning had first approached Mu Kaian. The moment Mu Kaian brought her to the family banquet, Chang Haitang's expression was truly a sight to behold. However, in this lifetime, Mu Wanning came directly to their door. After a minute that felt both brief and eternal, Chang Haitang pulled open the door. She was stunned upon seeing Mu Wanning. "Who are you looking for?" "My dad." Mu Wanning met Chang Haitang's gaze, her lips curling into a smile devoid of warmth. "Long time no see, Auntie Haitang." The color drained from Chang Haitang's face. Then she crossed her arms. "What have you gone back on your word from when you and your mother left the capital all those years ago?" Mu Wanning's reply was decisive, a gentle smile still gracing her face. "Auntie Haitang, everything has a price. Have you ever heard that saying?" I was just watching the drama unfold from the sidelines. With a flash of insight, I realized I seemed to have overlooked something very important. I quickly dialed Zhu Ling's number to ask for the list of doctors who had operated on Mu Wanning's mother. Zhu Ling was a doctor with a strong sense of justice. However, she didn't have the power to extend her reach to the capital, a fact that left her feeling bitter. The great, wealthy families were full of disgusting secrets they could easily cover up. Besides, it was their family's private business. However indignant she felt, she couldn't interfere. When I asked her for the list, Zhu Ling gave it to me. She also asked me to apologize to Mu Wanning on her behalf. If she had known this would happen, she never would have used doctors from the capital for the surgery in the first place. "Don't worry, Auntie Zhu, justice will prevail in the end." I looked at the list of names that arrived via text message. Zhu Ling had secretly investigated these people, and the ones under suspicion were circled in red. This saved me the trouble of investigating them myself. After all, this was part of the main plot. In her previous life, Mu Wanning never knew the truth behind her mother's death. If I hadn't intervened, her mother would have died unjustly once again. I clenched my fists. Traveling light, I headed straight for the Imperial Capital Hospital. On the way, I gave it some thought and hired a trustworthy private investigator to look into these people's account information and family members. The next day, as soon as the money was paid, the information was sent over. There were 3 people in total. On the day Yi King died, 300,000 yuan was transferred into the accounts of these 3 individuals. If Mu Wanning knew her mother's death was only worth 300,000 yuan, the consequences would be unimaginable. Mu Wanning successfully moved into the Mu family home. The atmosphere could only be described as chillingly cold. Mu Cheng took every opportunity to placate Chang Haitang, saying that Mu Wanning no longer had a mother, and as her father, he ought to show some care. Chang Haitang sneered instantly. "Show care? Every cent you're spending now, isn't it mine? If you want to be good to her, then go do it yourself. The money belongs to me and my daughter. It has nothing to do with you and yours. After all, Mu Cheng was a man, and one who had long been in a position of power. Words like these were tantamount to a blow to his pride. He endured it. If Chang Haitang hadn't used her money to boost him to his current position, he would have thrown her out without a second thought. A woman like a tigress, with no charm whatsoever. Am I causing trouble for you? Mu Wanning shrank in a corner of the dining table, her head lowered. Mu Cheng sighed. I have another house in the suburbs. I'll have the driver take you there in a bit. Mu Wanning pressed her lips together. I didn't come back to fight over anything, it's just, besides you, I don't know who else to turn to. Mom is dead. Hearing these words, Mu Cheng's heart clenched. They had been husband and wife, after all. During this time, he had also learned of some foul play. Yi King had been killed by Chang Haitang's machinations. Sleeping next to a murderer, Mu Cheng was also deeply unsettled. Rest assured. Tell Dad what your plans are for coming to the capital. I'll definitely help if I can. Mu Cheng spoke these words softly, afraid that Chang Haitang might overhear. Mu Wanning shook her head. Dad, can you help me find a job? I'll do anything, as long as I don't starve. Compared to the daughter raised in his own home, Mu Cheng's heart ached more for this one from the outside. With comparison comes hurt. The one at home followed Chang Haitang in her tyranny, treating him as if he were nothing. Mu Wanning, in contrast, seemed easy to manipulate and bully. Mu Cheng sighed. I'll see what I can do for you tomorrow. The main issue is that you haven't graduated from university. Didn't I hear you were accepted into Jiangda University? I had no money. Mu Wanning bit her lip, her face filled with embarrassment. I couldn't afford it. Mu Cheng sighed and said nothing. He had his own selfish intentions. He wanted to keep this daughter with him. He didn't want Chang Haitang to look down on him forever. If he hadn't managed the company with all his heart and soul these past years, could she have just sat at home enjoying the fruits of his labor? What a joke! This woman only knew how to hold his past shortcomings against him, never acknowledging his efforts. She thinks I'm just relying on her, does she? Fine, I'll lift Mu Wanning up and see how she handles it. I squatted by the elementary school gate, my face in my hands. The bubble gum in my mouth had long lost its flavor. It was the first time in my life doing something like this, and I was a bit scared. I recognized the child who ran out from the middle of the crowd. With one hand in my pocket and the other carrying snacks, I walked forward. Zhao Zhimao. The boy, who had his arm around a friend's shoulder, stopped and turned to look at me. I put on what I thought was my most innocent smile and waved. Come here. Zhao Zhimao was the son of one of those doctors, now in the 4th grade of elementary school. Were you just calling me? Zhao Zhimao studied me carefully. Who are you? I'm an intern working with your dad. I even made a show of pulling out a little red booklet, which was hospital staff identification. Tomorrow is Saturday. Your dad said he'd take you out, but he's too busy with work and doesn't have the time, so he asked me to take you. Where to? The amusement park. This kid, Zhao Zhimao, was quite shrewd. If we're going tomorrow, why not just come get me tomorrow? You dummy! I reached out and gave him a light rap on the head. The amusement park is the most fun at night. We'll play for a whole day and night. Tomorrow, your dad will come pick you up himself. Don't worry. Otherwise, I can give him a call for you. I glanced around at the surrounding parents. I added thoughtfully, I wonder what you scored on your monthly exam. If your dad knew that score, who knows if he'd even let you go. I'd better ask him, just in case. Brother, I was taking a gamble, but it paid off. Let's go to the amusement park now. Yes, I reached over and took his bag. We're going now, we'll take the bus. So they went to have fun, and while Zhao Zhimao had a blast, the Zhao family was going insane. A letter was delivered directly to Zhao Zhong at the hospital. He was so frightened, his face instantly turned pale. When he confirmed that his son had indeed not come home, Zhao Zhong panicked. He didn't dare raise the alarm, he just stared at the letter, taking deep breaths. It read, "I'm taking your son out for a bit of fun. I wonder if he's worth 100,000 yuan. Feel free to call the police if you want to spend the rest of your life in prison. I'll give you time to think it over. I'll be in touch." Zhao Zhong was remarkably composed, quietly waiting for the kidnapper to call. Meanwhile, I was at the amusement park, having so much fun I nearly threw up. Seeing that he was tired from playing, we both collapsed onto a bench to eat ice cream. I needed to call NB's dad so he wouldn't worry. "But you can't tell him about my grades. My dad will definitely get angry." "Don't worry, how could he possibly get angry? He absolutely adores you now." I made the call, my tone teasing. "I've brought your son out to play as requested. I wonder if you've thought things through yet. What do you want?" Zhao Zhong's voice had already begun to tremble. "What do I want?" I took a bite of my crispy ice cream cone and turned on my phone's call recording feature. "I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I expect you to answer truthfully. You are the ones who harmed Yi King." There was a long silence on the other end. I patted Zhao Zhimao on the head. He looked bewildered, so I said, "Oh dear, it seems NB's dad is a bit unwilling. What should we do?" Zhao Zhimao grew anxious. I quickly covered the phone's mouthpiece and said, "Let me persuade NB's dad. Wait for me here and don't run off, okay?" I stood a short distance from the bench. "You heard your son, didn't you? You say a patient's life in your hands isn't a life, so what about your son's? There's no need for me to treat it as one either, right?" He must have had me on speakerphone because Zhao Zhong's wife had started to cry and scream, begging me not to touch her son and urging Zhao Zhong to confess immediately. I like people like this. Rest assured, if you don't call the police, neither will I. I spoke in a light, nonchalant tone. "I just want to use you to threaten the people who paid you. Don't worry, I won't let it affect you. If you're truly afraid, I can give you a larger sum of money for you and your family to leave the capital. My patience is limited." I frowned, growing irritated at the thought that this man might refuse to talk. "I'll count to 3. If we don't have an agreement, I'm taking your son somewhere much farther away to play. As for whether you two will be reunited in this lifetime, I can't say. I can't afford to offend the person who paid me." "That's enough." I said, "It's Chang Herong of the Chang Corporation, correct? If you already knew, why did you ask me?" "She bribed the 3 of you to remove Yi King's oxygen tube." Zhao Zhong fell silent again. I frowned, but this time Zhao Zhong didn't keep me waiting long. He said, "The patient was allergic to penicillin, but I wasn't the one who did it. It was another doctor who administered the injection. I just followed orders, ready to tamper with things if necessary, but in reality, I did nothing." Good, all I needed was the key information. I saved the call recording, then summoned Zhao Zhimao and let the father and son have a talk. As for what they talked about, I didn't care to know. That night, while Zhao Zhimao was asleep, I found an internet cafe. I edited the call recording, altering the voice and removing key information before sending it to Chang Herong's email. I also made it clear that if anything at all happened to Mu Wanning, regardless of who was responsible, I would hold her accountable. After it was done, I anonymously sent Zhao Zhong 300,000 and told them to leave the capital. The email showed as read, and I smiled faintly. It had finally begun. By completing a hidden task, I had once again accelerated the plot's progression. No matter how arrogant and powerful Chang Herong was, this was a society ruled by law. If she was responsible for someone's death, she would have to face the consequences. Chang Herong, of course, saw it. She had been restless ever since receiving the email that night. Mu Wanning didn't concern herself with these miscellaneous matters. She just wanted to work her way into the company and retrieve what Gu King wanted. As for the outcome, that was a battle between business people. She noticed that Chang Herong had been paying close attention to her movements lately. At the breakfast table, Mu Wanning finally couldn't help but ask, "Auntie Chang, have I done something wrong recently?" "You've done very well." Chang Herong practically said the words through clenched teeth. Mu Wanning's mouth twitched into a wry smile. Chang Herong slammed her chopsticks down. "You think you can threaten me with just that? I don't understand what you're talking about." Mu Wanning lowered her head and frowned. She truly didn't understand, as I had never mentioned any of this to her. "Didn't you send that email?" Overcome with rage, Chang Herong actually laughed. "Threatening me with something like this? You should know your place. Go on, report me if you have the guts. I'd like to see what earth-shattering deeds a stray dog like you can accomplish." Mu Wanning pressed her lips together. She wasn't foolish enough to ask what email it was, but seeing Chang Herong as agitated as a snake struck at its weak spot, she was willing to take the blame for it. Mu Wanning wiped the corner of her mouth and said with a smile, "In that case, Auntie Chang, you'd better watch closely." The first thing Mu Wanning did after leaving the house was go to my hotel. After carefully checking that she wasn't being followed, she booked a room as a cover, then took the stairs on the way to her room to find me. The moment I opened the door, Mu Wanning grabbed my arm, pushed me down onto the hotel sofa, and stood over me imposingly. "Let me ask you, what email did you send to Chang Herong?" I was taken aback again and immediately blurted out, "She told you. How did you know it was me?" "Do I look stupid to you?" Mu Wanning pointed to herself. "In the Imperial Capital, I'm the only one who can help her. She doesn't even need to think about it." I shook my head and scratched my neck, a look of helplessness on my face. "It's nothing. I just found a little leverage on her. I was afraid she would give you a hard time at the Chang family, so I threatened her a bit." "How have you been at the Mu family residence? Have they bullied you?" I looked her over from head to toe, only feeling relieved when I saw no signs of her having been beaten. "What have you done behind my back again?" Mu Wanning asked. I was about to speak, but then I remembered that this matter involved her mother. Mu Wanning might take revenge on those doctors in the future. With her vindictive nature, you could never be sure. "I just compiled some of the bad things she's done," I answered vaguely. "But this isn't enough to ruin her completely. I'll wait for the right moment to release it. Even if it doesn't destroy her, it will make her suffer greatly." Seeing my determined expression, Mu Wanning furrowed her brow. In her eyes, I was a problem child, incapable of doing anything proper but well, versed in all sorts of shady methods. Mu Wanning bent down and took my hand. "Gu Xian, you really don't have to do so much for me. I'm not a child who needs protection." "True," I had a calm expression. "I never said you needed protection. I'm doing all this so my own mission can proceed smoothly." With a smile on my face, I reached out, took her hand, and patted it earnestly. "My dear girlfriend, you must remember, we can't do anything illegal, you understand." "You're the one who shouldn't." Mu Wanning squeezed my hand back, her tone even more teasing. "I think, compared to me, you're the one who seems less like a good person." I, who had just kidnapped a child the day before yesterday, was left speechless. Mu Wanning stayed with me at the hotel, and we watched the sunset. "After you're done dealing with the Chang family, do you have any other plans? For example, doing something you enjoy?" I turned my head. Mu Wanning looked up at me. "I don't have anything I like. She paused, then spoke again, her gaze heavy as she looked at me, but on second thought, I think I do now. I blinked. In her original story, after killing me, she was like a lonely soul wandering the world every day, devoid of any warmth. Blinded by hatred, there was no turning back for her. In the original story, she loved Lin Zixuan with a passion that seemed all-consuming, but it was actually a morbid obsession. She saw him as the light of her life, something she desperately wanted to possess. After being shattered by reality, she resolutely killed him, driven by the thought that if she couldn't have him, no one else could. She was a complete psychopath, through and through. I don't want her to become that person again. Even if I leave, I hope Mu Wanning can live a good life, like a normal human being. Mu Wanning suddenly drew closer to me, her eyelashes trembling slightly, a smile playing on her lips. I want to be with you. Mu Wanning stuffed a chestnut into my already dazed mouth. I need to make more money. With the fruit in my mouth, I chewed. It was fragrant, sweet, and soft, yet my mouth tasted incredibly bitter. Do you think what we have between us is love? Mu Wanning's hand paused. Why would you say that? You said back then that you didn't like me, and you never would. But I also said that if you provoked me again, I would never let go, not even in death. Mu Wanning wiped her hands, wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and pulled me closer to her. You were the one who barged into my world. Now that you're here, don't even think about leaving. Time seemed to stand still. I could hear my own heartbeat. A strange thought flashed through my mind, then vanished just as quickly. And you, Mu Wanning asked, is there anything you want to accomplish? Yes, I said, gazing at the scenery. I want to go to a certain place, to find out who is waiting for me. Mu Wanning could see I was being sincere. It was the first time she had seen such an expression on my face, lost, sad, and helpless. Even though I was right there, it was as if I were a world away. Mu Wanning instinctively grabbed my arm, her gaze turning grim. Don't tell me that besides that Yao, you're pining for another woman. Why are you bringing her up for no reason? I frowned. In Mu Wanning's eyes, I looked completely evasive. She reached out, pulled me closer, and said with a smile, "What, unhappy that I mentioned your fiancé?" "Fiancé, don't be ridiculous." I tapped her forehead. That was just something our parents arranged for business. I had the engagement called off after I brought down the Gu family. It was a fortunate thing to hear. Of course not. Don't say things like that. I watched her warily. Jiang Yuyao and I were just bad influences on each other. I was immature then. Now that I have you, I don't need anyone else. I leaned against her shoulder, trying to appease her. To some extent, my compliant posture satisfied the possessiveness deep within her. That's for the best. Mu Wanning leaned in and kissed my cheek. I have to go. Remember to let me know before you go out. Things are only going to get more dangerous, and I can't guarantee your safety. Deep down, Mu Wanning was afraid. Now that she had a vulnerability, she was no longer the indifferent person who had nothing to lose. All right, don't you worry. I gave her my promise, but she didn't take it seriously. My words were just hot air, after all, and I had no intention of listening. But for once, I actually tuned out the world, relaxing on the hotel's king-sized bed while scenes from Mu Wanning's daily life played through my mind. Watching the host fall into such sloth, the little assistant finally lost its patience on the third day. You don't seem worried about her at all. Worry about her? I'd be better off worrying about myself, I scoffed. I had seen through it long ago. Mu Wanning was more formidable than any conquest target I had ever met. She was a real, living person with her own strategies and plans. For just one wrong word, her favorability score dropped by 20 points. Heavens, it was so hard for me to accumulate 20 points, and with a single thought, Mu Wanning sent me right back to square one. So, to increase her favorability score, I discovered a little trick. Mu Wanning liked submissiveness. Every time I proactively reported what I did and what I was thinking that day, the favorability score would rise by 3 to 5 points, and the corruption value would drop as the favorability score increased. Mu Wanning said she only had me, and that wasn't a lie. She already saw me as the only life, saving medicine in this world, helping her cling to her sanity. In her subconscious, she wasn't left with nothing. Mu Wanning wanted to have a better future, and she had entrusted it entirely to me. Of course, these were things I did not understand. I was just happy that the chances of successfully completing the mission had become much greater. I didn't know why, but Mu Wanning occasionally gave me a very familiar feeling. I tossed and turned in bed. Little helper, do you remember how I entered the system space? My memory of it was already hazy. I only remembered that when I first arrived, I seemed very fixated on one thing, getting what I wanted most. But as for what I wanted most, I had forgotten. I remember you were like a lunatic back then. Shut up the moment the little helper spoke, I retorted. It pursed its lips and said nothing more. I rarely dreamed. Traveling through various parallel universes at the system's command to complete missions was already surreal enough. I spent my days either terrified or exhausted. There was no time for dreams. This time, however, I dreamt of a scene that was both strange and familiar. I was certain that I had never experienced this before. It was a woman. The woman's face was shrouded in a mist, her features indistinct. But my heart ached unbearably, a dull, throbbing pain. The scene was a bathroom. Blood was draining from the woman's body, swirling down the drain with the water from the shower. A man in a blood-stained suit was holding her face, his shoulders trembling constantly. This feeling was like watching a mission film from a parallel universe in the system space. I heard the man's words. He said, "Don't leave me." He seemed to say something else after that, but the system issued a warning, and accompanied by the crackle of static, I woke up from the dream instantly. Staring at the ceiling, the feeling from the dream lingered, but the images began to slowly fade. What happened? I asked aloud, discovering my voice was incredibly hoarse. As I struggled to get out of bed for a glass of water, I heard the system say, "The strategy target has been attacked and is now critically injured with extremely low health points." What? At the system's words, the glass in my hand fell to the floor, shattering into pieces with a loud crash. What had happened? I scrambled out of bed and quickly changed out of my pajamas. In my haste, I didn't even notice I had put my shirt on inside out. The system extracted a key clip. Mu Wanning and Mu Cheng were on their way home, discussing company business. Mu Wanning was truly talented in this regard, grasping many concepts instantly, which made Mu Cheng give her an admiring second glance. Unexpectedly, the harmonious father-daughter moment was shattered. A car, as if out of control, rushed towards them as they waited at a traffic light. Mu Wanning instinctively threw herself from the passenger seat onto Mu Cheng. Shards of broken glass scraped her, covering her in blood, and the largest piece stabbed straight into her back. The airbag deployed, smashing hard against Mu Wanning's forehead. Her body went limp, and she passed out. The scene shifted, showing Mu Cheng dragging Mu Wanning out of the car, still reeling from the shock. Mu Wanning looked as if she were dead. Her chest showed no signs of rising and falling. Somehow, the dream I had almost forgotten surfaced in my mind. I seemed to see the woman's face in the dream clearly. It was Mu Wanning. This realization nearly made my heart stop. I got up in agony and began to cough violently. Feeling a metallic taste in my throat, I spat out a mouthful, the red blood hidden by the red carpet. Stunned, I wiped my lips and practically scrambled to the hospital, where Mu Wanning was receiving emergency treatment. Mu Wanning can't die. If she dies, I'm finished. As I got into a taxi, I suddenly remembered the system's words. It had said attack. This was no accident, it was deliberate. Someone wanted Mu Wanning dead. When I arrived at the hospital, Mu Wanning had not yet come out of emergency treatment. There was no one outside the emergency room. I made a special trip to Mu Cheng's ward, which was packed with people. Mu Cheng had been well, protected by Mu Wanning, and had only suffered some minor scrapes, yet gifts were piled up like a small mountain. The contrast between the two scenes was stark. Although I had expected it, seeing it with my own eyes still filled me with an unbearable bitterness. I think I could finally understand the actions of the original Mu Wanning. Just as I had said, she sprouted from darkness and bloomed on the edge of a cliff. "Are any of Mu Wanning's relatives or friends here?" the doctor asked, walking out and looking at the empty hallway with bewilderment. It was likely the first time he had ever encountered a situation where no one was waiting outside. I wiped away my tears and stood up. "You're Mu Wanning's. She's my girlfriend, so I have the right to make decisions on these matters. Is she okay now?" The surgery was a success. Her lungs weren't injured. She has a minor concussion, and the glass fragments in her body have been completely removed. "We're just finishing up the operation now, and we need your signature." I glanced at the medical bill and sniffled. "Where do I pay?" "At the cashier on the first floor." "Thank you." I smoothly signed my name and stood by the door, waiting until the surgery in progress light went out. When Mu Wanning was wheeled out, her eyes were still closed, and her head and body were wrapped in gauze. "Wanning!" I quickly went to her side. I wanted to reach out and hold her, but she was covered in wounds, and I was afraid I might accidentally hurt her. "Why are you here?" Mu Wanning struggled to speak, her lips twitching into a faint smile. "I'm fine, just a little dizzy." "The patient is on partial anesthesia and needs to rest now," the doctor reminded me. I nodded. "I know. I'll be over in a moment," I sniffled, carefully leaning down close to Mu Wanning's face. "Don't be afraid. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I won't attack unless I'm attacked. Mu Wanning's life is more precious than my own." None of this was in the original plot. I figure the system won't blame me for getting invested in this matter, right? Mu Wanning suddenly reached out and grabbed me, her emotions running high. I looked at her and gently pried her hand away. "Get some rest." Mu Wanning rarely saw my back. When we walked together, I would always stay a couple of small steps behind, following her like a little shadow. It was always like that before. Mu Wanning was always the one walking ahead, the one to leave first. As the elevator doors closed, Mu Wanning watched through the gap as my back grew more distant. She couldn't hold on, she couldn't grasp me. This sense of loss made her dizzier still, and unable to fight it any longer, she fell into a deep sleep. I stood in the hallway outside Mu Cheng's hospital room, staring up at the fluorescent lights. Was it Chang Haitang? But what reason would she have to try and kill Mu Wanning? Could it be because of that email? No, that's not right. Chang Haitang is the only daughter of the Chang family. She's always been domineering and unforgiving, but at her core, she's still just a woman. Otherwise, why would she suddenly go mad after seeing her daughter being schemed against and her husband writing a will? This shows how fragile her psyche was. Although it didn't show on the surface, she was exhausted from holding on all by herself. Then who could it be? I pressed my lips together, having made a decision. This was a good opportunity. Regardless of whether Chang Haitang had actually harmed Mu Wanning, she would have to take the blame for it. To ensure Mu Wanning's safety. I suddenly craved candy. It wasn't a habit of mine. The thought just popped into my head. So I went and bought a handful of candy, stuffing my pockets full. When the people in Mu Cheng's hospital room had finally left, I seized the opportunity and slipped inside. Mu Cheng was so lost in thought that he didn't even notice me enter. I spoke first, pulling up a chair for myself. Mu Cheng came to his senses and looked at the strange boy before him. He wasn't old, one might even call him naive, yet he wore a cold expression, feigning maturity. Mu Cheng smiled slightly. "And you are?" "Your wife wants to kill you," I said flatly. Mu Cheng's brows furrowed. It wasn't that he hadn't considered this possibility. With Mu Wanning's arrival, his relationship with Chang Haitang was already at a breaking point. She was not one to tolerate any slight. The reason he hadn't attended to Mu Wanning yet was that he feared Chang Haitang would try again if her first attempt failed. "You can't make such wild accusations," Mu Cheng said. "Who are you? Why are you trying to sow discord between my wife and me?" "You want to see proof?" I asked, ignoring his questions. I looked up at him calmly. "Wait for me. I'll go get you the proof. Our meeting is a secret." Standing at the doorway, I raised my index finger to my lips in a hushing gesture toward him. "As for why I'm telling you this, all I can say is that she provoked someone she shouldn't have. Even if you don't take action, I won't let her off the hook." After I left, Mu Cheng remained deep in thought. Someone she shouldn't have provoked. Who could that be? Mu Cheng reached for a glass of water. So much had happened recently that he couldn't sort through his thoughts. With my hands in my pockets, I wandered aimlessly through the hospital. The system assistant asked blankly what I was thinking, and I replied, "It's obvious that events have already veered off their original course. Check Mu Wanning's corruption level. Villain's corruption level, 70. Do you know why people feel resentment?" My naive little assistant didn't understand, and could only ask blankly, "Why?" Because of the prejudice she faced, because of her helplessness, because she couldn't accept it. I turned around. "Although I don't know your system's definition of a corruption value, I don't think this is Mu Wanning becoming corrupted. This is an emotional response any normal person would have. You expect her to live peacefully and be a good person under these circumstances. Forget Mu Wanning, even I would go insane." "So, host, you're planning to." The little assistant already had a vague sense of foreboding. My expression was serene. After all, in the original setting, Mu Wanning had a long list of misdeeds, so I can't take the risk. I'm also afraid she'll find pleasure in revenge and revert to her old ways. So, what others owe her, I will collect. Where she is powerless, I will give her the means. Her unresolved grievances, I will remedy for her. I needed the bubble gum in my hand. I refuse to believe she can still become corrupted after all this. "She won't be corrupted, but you are," the little assistant said quietly. It knew its host never acted conventionally. When she first started the system's missions, it had been utter chaos, with her doing as she pleased. Now she was doing all the things a villain would, yet calling it a rescue mission, and somehow the assistant felt it was almost justifiable. It figured its own way of thinking must have been messed up from following this host. I said I would look for evidence, but I made no move to do so. Instead, when no one was around, I would slip into Mu Wanning's hospital room and care for her attentively. This time I was truly consulting with Mu Wanning, and through our discussion, we managed to uncover some key information. The assailant was indeed hired by Chang Haitang, Mu Wanning stated, as if discussing a matter that had nothing to do with her. I frowned. She's that ruthless. I hadn't interfered with Chang Haitang's storyline, so how could she have deviated from her original character? However, she only intended to scare me, Mu Wanning said with a small smile. I was the one who told the assailant to be more vicious, to make it look more convincing. I drew in a sharp breath. "Scared?" Mu Wanning asked, the corners of her lips curving as she watched my expression. "Perhaps you were right before. I'm not a good person by nature." But you haven't hurt anyone else, I said, fiddling with the corner of her blanket, and from now on, you're not allowed to hurt yourself either. This was the easiest way to win Mu Cheng's trust. Mu Wanning sighed. You were right to do what you did, but next time, before you act, can you please talk to me about it first? I was merely providing Mu Cheng with an incentive. Since Chang Haitang was indeed behind it, there's bound to be a trail to follow, I said with a laugh. And even if she hadn't, I have ways to make sure she took the blame. Mu Wanning stared into my eyes. I maintained an innocent expression, but my words were utterly sinister. Mu Wanning reached out and caressed my cheek. Thinking about it, the two of us were truly a perfect match. In the days that followed, Mu Cheng did indeed start investigating Chang Haitang. That strange young man from the other day never returned after he left. He didn't believe the words of others, he only trusted what he saw for himself. Lying in his hospital bed, Mu Cheng felt a chill run through his entire body. Chang Haitang had brought him soup, but he hadn't touched a single drop, terrified that the woman might have poisoned it. When Chang Haitang heard that Mu Wanning had been rushed to the emergency room and Mu Cheng was covered in injuries, she was actually quite stunned. Although the car was found to have faulty brakes and the driver remained tight-lipped, she never expected those people to act with such recklessness. You should go home, Mu Cheng sighed. He had tolerated Chang Haitang for far too long. The woman was insatiable and fiercely ambitious, and he was simply exhausted. It was true, he had married this woman years ago out of a lust for power and status, securing a life of privilege for himself. But now he no longer needed Chang Haitang. This woman, the one lying beside him, was as venomous as a snake. Whenever Mu Cheng looked at her, he felt as if his head were hanging by a thread, never knowing when it might be severed from his body. Not only had Chang Haitang been secretly transferring his company shares, but she had also taken out a massive life insurance policy on him. He worked himself to the bone for the company, only for her to plan on cashing in on his death. After 20 years of marriage, not a shred of human decency remained. Having made a mistake, Chang Haitang's attitude did improve significantly. She became obedient to Mu Cheng's every word. However, this didn't lead him to believe she had softened. He suspected she was merely afraid of her schemes being exposed. After Chang Haitang left, Mu Cheng began to make his move. On the surface, he was in control of the corporation, but everyone knew Chang Haitang was the true power behind the scenes. He was determined to oust her. Since she had decided to be ruthless, she couldn't blame him for showing no mercy. I hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. When I saw the news about the corporation making headlines, I was completely stunned. Wanning, I said, showing the good news to Mu Wanning. The headlines read stock market plummets and marriage collapses. Below them was a scandalous, pixelated photo of Chang Haitang in a ridiculous pose, and the comments section was even more vicious. I grimaced, a worried look on my face. This wasn't your doing, was it? In the original plot, this was, in fact, something Mu Wanning had done. At that moment, however, Mu Wanning simply frowned and said, "You're by my side 24 hours a day. When would I have had the time to do this?" "Then it must have been Mu Cheng," I said, my expression indescribable, as if I had just eaten something foul. After being married for so many years, how could he possibly leak this kind of story about his own wife? And those photos. Mu Wanning was also disgusted by such actions, but she remained silent. Next, Mu Cheng will probably break things off completely with Chang Haitang, I remarked with a sigh. The Mu family's affairs had finally come to a head, and best of all, Mu Wanning wasn't the one behind it. Could there be anything more satisfying than watching your enemies destroy each other while you reap the rewards? Just as I had predicted, the Mu family was falling apart. Chang Haitang dared not leave her house. She could never have imagined that Mu Cheng would plot against her. Meanwhile, that very man, wearing a false, official-looking mask, pushed a contract in front of her and said, "For the good of the company, just sign the agreement." Chang Haiteng seethed through gritted teeth. "You truly are an ungrateful monster. I should have let that car kill you back then. So you admit it." Mu Cheng's expression remained impassive as he watched her in silence. "I have put up with you for a very long time. What did Yi King do wrong?"